and welcome to the Southern Star's Coronavirus podcast. I'm the news editor, Siobhan Cronin.
And I'm Southern Star Creative Manager, Niall O'Driscoll.
And each week we're talking to people at the centre of the COVID-19 pandemic in West Cork and beyond. And we'll also take a look at that week's Southern Star newspaper and how our reporters all around West Cork are covering the pandemic and other news. And this week we'll also have some music from our Southern Star Sessions files, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Also in this week's podcast, I will be talking to the new Chief Executive of the Ludgate Digital Hub in Skibbereen, local woman Grainne O'Keeffe. But first now, let's have a look at this week's newspaper.
Yes, Siobhan, on page one, there's a very strange story about Irish Water.
There is.
With the headline Double Trouble. Can you explain it?
Double Trouble. So this is something that came up originally at a council meeting that our reporter Kieran O'Mahony was at. And some people who had received planning permission before 2014 had paid what they thought was their water connection contribution to Cork County Council at the time. But for various reasons, their building may have been delayed, what have you. And in recent times, when they went then to get their water connection sorted, of course, they're now dealing with Irish Water, they were told they had to pay again. So Councillor Joe Carroll actually brought it up, and he had managed on a few occasions to help people out and bring down the price. One person was being charged another €2,272, and they managed to get that down to €700. But since that, he's discovered a few other people in the same position. So we asked Irish Water for a quote statement on it this week, and myself and Emma Conley, who works in the office, the two of us went through the statement and could not make head nor tail of what the explanation was. So Emma got back on to Irish Water and got them to explain in as simple terms as possible what has actually happened there. Now, what they're saying is that people who paid a contribution charge to the council pre-2014 may have been under the impression they'd covered their water costs. But the spokesperson said that couldn't have been the case because the works hadn't actually been done. So while Irish Water have acknowledged the situation may be confusing, they do say that the additional charges have been capped at €2,272 for the physical connection when it's carried out, and at a cap of €3,900 for wastewater treatment. Now, really, that's still as confusing as ever, as far as we can see. But I would imagine this is a story that's going to run no more like a leaky tap for another few months, because I'm quite sure that people aren't going to be happy with that explanation either.
See, it seems to me that the one thing they've got right there is acknowledging that the whole thing is very confusing, because it really is, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And it just seems like another thing in the whole Irish Water saga, another negative story, unfortunately.
It is, and it's we seem to be carrying a negative story every week, and actually this week we have two, because on the back page we have another story about water outages in Schull during their busiest holiday time. So there's been a lot of criticism of that as well. So I'm afraid poor old Irish Water are really getting it in the neck these days. But I just one little piece of advice to Irish Water: if you're going to send out a statement, please make it legible, because if myself and my colleagues who are reading Irish Water stories every week, if we can't make head nor tail of it, you can be damn sure that a reader who only has occasional cause to read these stories won't be able to understand it either. So word to the wise there, Irish Water, keep it simple.
Now, there's another story. There's kind of two stories within one here, really, not unrelated to water either, about whales and dolphins off the coast at the weekend.
Yeah, two incredible stories. One was some fantastic footage. I think Sean Maxwell is the skipper of the Lady Louise, which is the boat that operates out of Courtmacsherry. It's called Atlantic Whale and Wildlife Tours. And for the first time, he's just got a drone there the week before, and for the first time that he was using it practically, he got the most amazing footage of numerous whales. They were all congregating around what's known as a bait ball created by dolphins, whereby the dolphins are kind of in a circle as the fish are gathering to obviously feed, and then the whales come along. And so there was just really wonderful footage there that went viral. But then on top of that, Sorry, Niall?
Sorry, I looking at the footage. It's worthy of David Attenborough. I was going to say Richard Attenborough. It's worthy of a David Attenborough documentary, isn't it? It's quite
It is
spectacular.
really, it's fabulous, yes. And to think it's just a few miles off our own shores. But while we were researching that, another story came to us about a Clonakilty man who was actually sent flying overboard into choppy waters when a minke whale slammed into the side of his fishing boat on Monday. So Chris Lane and his friend David McCann were just a few miles off Gallyhead when they spotted about 200 dolphins and 8 minke whales and a fin whale all feeding nearby. So they stopped to take photos, but then out of nowhere, one of the minke whales, which they reckon was about 15 feet long, slammed full force into the boat. And Chris said, he blew me straight overboard while David was sent flying backwards. So luckily he had his life jacket on and he's a good swimmer, so he managed to make it back to the boat. But it just shows you that even though these are beautiful creatures and we love stopping to take pictures and videos of them, they have some force when they come at us, probably not intentionally, but they can still do quite a bit of damage when they're frolicking in the water a little bit too close to us.
Well, for what it's worth, and for the landlubbers amongst us, I saw myself a lot of dolphins from the road around the coast in Castlehaven at the weekend. You could see them quite clearly. So for people who might be a bit nervous about going out in the water, maybe take a chance and take a drive around Castlehaven or somewhere. Wonderful to see that. Really, 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 and the kids loved it, of course. It's great.
Well, it's great what we have right on our doorstep. So, and it's no better year for a staycation, I think, if we're going to see all this activity right just a few miles offshore. There's a very sad story, though, this week. We also have on the front page about a horrific crash just outside Glengariff on the Kenmare Road, where 4 people travelling in a car and 2 lost their lives, 1 seriously injured, and miraculously a 4th young man managed to get out of the car and help his colleague drag him to safety. So that is just a pretty sad story there on page 1 about that crash that happened there the weekend.
Yeah, very, 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 very sad indeed. And I suppose not unusual on a bank holiday weekend to hear those kind of stories coming out, I suppose.
Not, yeah.
It's very sad, yeah.
So, and also the week that was in it was the week we were all waiting to hear what was going to happen with the pubs in the next phase of reopening. But I suppose the news came through, maybe not that surprisingly, given that the figures are really beginning to climb up again, that the pubs were not now open. So quite a few of the publicans are really up in arms at this stage, because I think part of the reason is they're getting such late notification that they were really pretty sure this time, I think, that they were going to get the green light, and a lot of them had ordered in kegs of beer, and they're saying that, you know, those will be spoiled now because they can't. I think there's like a 6-week window you have where you have to start using them, and other than that they have to go back. So that's another additional cost on top of the losses that they've had so far, and they're describing the summer of 2020 as a lost summer.
And I suppose a lot of them had tried to make good of the situation all along by doing renovations and doing up their pubs and things that when they ordinarily wouldn't be able to, because they'd be open for 360 something days of the year. So yeah, it's really hitting them hard, isn't it?
It certainly is, but I suppose at the end of the day you have to remember that people are consuming drugs on these premises, and it does bring down your inhibitions, and it's probably not a good thing not to be 100% on your guard at the moment. So I do see both sides of the argument there. But on a lighter note, we had a nice story this week about the Glengariff Eagle Chick, and they're looking for a new name for her. They've now decided it's a lady chick. So the Parks and Wildlife Service in Glengariff are asking people to volunteer a name for the little.
And she's just 16 weeks old, I think, is it?
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
And she has a sort of a name already, a little bit Dot, I think. Is that correct?
But I think that's the tag that's on her, that the name arose out of that, Dot. But I think they want something a little bit more permanent and maybe
a bit more inspiring, perhaps.
Exactly. Yeah. So I just thought it was interesting because Mum is still with her, but Dad has long since flown the nest. So any day now they're expecting baby Dot to head off as well and make their way in the world. So it's just a nice little pandemic uplifting story. The chick that was born during the pandemic, I suppose. Maybe there's a clue as to the name. Maybe they'll call her Corona.
Pandora, maybe. I see another story there on page 3 about people, what's wild camping and what people are letting behind after themselves. It's not very pleasant.
No, it's not a great read for over your lunch. But no more than all the new phrases, new normal, and all the rest we've come to learn. I hadn't actually heard about wild camping until the pandemic hit, but apparently it's a big thing, which is just basically pitching a tent wherever you want and making the best of it. But the problem is that I suppose there's no facilities on these non-sites. So people are using them as toilets, and people are cooking, and people are, unfortunately, in a lot of cases, leaving the stuff behind. And I don't think too many people would have an issue with this if people would just pick up the rubbish and bring it with them. So we have pictures of a kind of a broken tent left behind in Inchydoney, a Tesco bag of food debris left behind in Dragomna, and I think there's hardly been a beach really around West Cork that hasn't been plagued by this. So just maybe a note of caution there. If you are planning to go away for the weekend and camp, please make sure to leave the spot as you found it.
Yeah, I was in Longstrand at the weekend, and again, now you know that we'd always see little bits of rubbish, bottles and things like that may have just as easily have come in off the water as been dropped there. But there was definitely other items there that were, say, you're talking in terms of toilet paper and that kind of stuff that you wouldn't ordinarily see in the dunes or on the beach and things like that. I can't but help thinking it was coming from where there may have been camping going on, because there was definitely evidence of camping having happened there, maybe in the couple of days beforehand or whatever, you know.
Yeah, like I said, I don't think people would mind so much, you know, if there's just people make an effort just to tidy up after them, really, you know.
It's just the take it home mentality again, isn't it? Whatever, you know, leave no trace kind of thing, like, you know.
Exactly, leave no trace. So then we have yeah.
Oh yeah, I was just going to move on to a story that I saw myself there on page 5, actually, about it's a big feature on Jersey.
Yes, it's there's a big project, some people may know, others may not, that the County Council and Fáilte Ireland have kind of come together with a big plan for Jersey Island. Now, it's always been a very popular little tourist spot because it's quite quirky, I think, because it's the only cable car in Ireland. A lot of people still don't even know we have a cable car in Ireland, and it goes over and back to the island, and it brings people out, and quite a lot of bird watchers go there, walkers go there. There isn't really a whole lot on the island, you know, as regards commercially, but they're planning to do a big, you know, tourist centre there, to have 2 cable cars going in either direction, as in one in either direction, 2 at the same time. And up until now, they could carry a maximum of 18 passengers per hour, but they reckon it'll up to 80,000 per year. And so we're carrying a piece there for and against the project. So Nicole Quint is a German travel writer who's won awards for her travel writing, and she is a great fan of Jersey. And she's just making the argument that you go to Jersey for the quietness and the tranquility and the peace, or maybe to look at a few birds in your binoculars. And so why would you want to attract thousands of people to somewhere that people go to for quietness? And also she's saying, you know, at the moment there's over touristing places, that there's a lot of concern around the world that too many people are going to particular sites and ruining them. And she's saying now we have a chance not to do this in Ireland, so please don't do it. Then on the other side of the coin, we have Dermot Dwyer, who was actually on holidays down here recently. Now, Dermot is actually a former tourism consultant and a past president of the Irish Hotels Federation, and he's currently a chairman of the Convention Centre in Dublin. And he's saying there's some financial supports available at the moment, and if you don't grab them while they're going, you may not get them again. And he thinks, look, he says the Wild Atlantic Way was such a fantastic initiative, and he likens it a bit to the Kerrygold brand, how Kerrygold is such a brand name now in America and across Europe, and it signifies, healthy, clean Irish food, and that this could be our Kerrygold moment, no more than the Wild Atlantic Way was for the West Coast. And that why don't we grab it, while we can, go for this big project and bring people down to the Beara Peninsula, because it is very under touristed, he says, at the moment, and there's plenty of potential there. So, I suppose you can see both sides of the argument. So we just wanted to put the two pieces together and let people have a read of both and decide, what they felt themselves.
It's that classic kind of catch-22 situation, isn't it? And on one hand, they're talking about staycations and all that kind of stuff, and tourism and bringing money into the area, but at the same time, you're kind of going, well, we want you, but we don't want you,
Yeah, it is. They need jobs, obviously, in places like this.
Of course.
But you don't want to over egg it either, and basically bite the hand that feeds you. So it needs to be, I'd say, a very carefully walked tightrope at the moment. So we'll just see what comes of that. Carefully
walked along the cables on the door,
exactly,
on the table.
Yes.
I said we've had a few stories in the past couple of years about Bantry and seaweed farming, but I see there's a seaweed story from Bantry with a different slant this time.
There is, yeah. This is a story that has been picked up quite well on the agricultural journalism end of things, but we did our own little piece on it this week, and that is that the Marine Research Centre down there in Bantry has been researching for some time the benefits of using seaweed in animal feed, basically, and the fact that it is able to reduce the carbon footprint of the herd, I suppose, and it's to do with chemical reactions in food and feed, and they really think they've hit on something. So it's probably a lot more complicated than the way we've described it, but they certainly think now that this could be a great way of Ireland reducing its carbon footprint. And of course, we do have deadlines coming up, and we do have fines looming over us if we don't meet those deadlines of reducing the carbon emissions. So it's just an interesting one, and it's nice to know that such groundbreaking research is being done right here in West Cork.
Sure, and you'd like to think, being the island nation that we are, that we should have a fairly plentiful supply of seaweed to feed the cattle.
Well, we certainly do. We've such a supply of it that I think big industry is actually looking at it, and that's a whole different argument and a whole different campaign, whether we should be harvesting the seaweed mechanically or leaving it to the small operators. But I suppose this is a different argument entirely, really. Despite where we get the seaweed, this is what it can do when we do harvest it. So it's just a nice little interesting one there. And then just on the whole pandemic reopening theme again, we're also having a chat with a few local school principals who, of course, have just a few weeks to go now when they're going to be reopening the schools, and we just want to see what they are thinking about the preparations they have to make before the schools open. So we've spoken to a few of the local principals in West Cork, and we've a nice picture there of Star of the Sea. John Driscoll is a deputy principal, and he is out measuring his distances between his desks and organising sanitisation stations and all the rest. So if you have kids getting ready to go back to school, that's just a nice, interesting one to see what exactly is going on behind the scenes.
It sounds to me as it could be as tricky as trying to organise social distancing in the aforementioned pubs. with small children.
Small children and drunk adults probably have an awful lot in common, I'd imagine, when it comes to organising.
Yeah, and it's hard to blame any of them in one sense, but it's just a fact of life, I'm afraid,
Exactly. So thanks, Niall. Don't forget, if you can't get to the shops, you can subscribe online by going to thesouthernstarTV and clicking on the e-paper tab at the top, or call the office on 028 21200 for a postal copy to be sent out to you. Percy Ludgate, a Skibbereen man born in 1883, is believed to have invented one of the world's first computers. And in his honour, 3 years ago, the Ludgate Digital Hub was born at the former Fields Bakery in Skibbereen. This 1 gigabyte hub of activity is supported by Vodafone and SIRO in a joint venture, and local woman Grainne O'Keeffe is the hub's newly appointed CEO. She spoke to me earlier about the hub, her love of West Cork, and why now more than ever the ability to work remotely in places like West Cork is so important. So Grainne, you're the new Chief Executive of Ludgate here in Skibbereen. So that's a very exciting time for you. But for those who aren't familiar with the whole concept of Ludgate, it's been in operation since 2017. Can you just explain a little bit about what it's all about?
I'd be delighted to. So Ludgate is a vital resource in the local community, and it facilitates job and business creation. I suppose our mission statement is primarily to create jobs to revitalise the local community, and that's never been more important as now with the pandemic. And what they've achieved over the last 4 or 5 years since inception has been significant. I think if you look at the key ingredients of the 1 gigabyte speed and the skills that are available here, that has allowed Ludgate to provide a co-working space to enable people move here and work from here, whether they are individual people who are working on their own or whether they are working within a company that's based here. So in terms of what is Ludgate, Ludgate is actually a movement, but it's actually a physical building as well. The building is part of the movement. The movement is the job creation in West Cork, of which the building is one of the foundations of. The other foundation is that connectivity that I mentioned, that 1 gigabyte speed, that Skibbereen was the first town in Ireland to receive that from the collaboration, the joint venture between Vodafone and SIRO, and that has been one of the key success factors that have allowed us be as successful as we are in attracting either individuals to establish themselves here or companies to establish a footprint here. I suppose if you look at our track record, we believe we've contributed to, not necessarily exclusively on our own, but we've facilitated the right environment for the creation of over 130 jobs. And that's obviously a dynamic number given the buoyancy of the local economy and the national economy and the international economy. So that's moving somewhat, and at the moment, obviously, it's a very vulnerable number. So we're very focused on trying to keep that as safe as possible and nurture the jobs that we have here already, as well as obviously grow that base.
Okay, so now you are from Skibbereen originally yourself, but you have a very impressive CV. Over 20 years, you've worked for the likes of JP Morgan, I think Bank of Ireland is where you kicked off, Goldman Sachs, and you've lived in Tokyo, London and New York, and now you can add Skibbereen to that CV. So why come home at this stage in your career, do you think?
So, you know, yeah, it sounds very exciting, and it was very exciting, and I did have a fantastic time, you know, hopping across the globe there to London, Tokyo, New York. I started, as you said, with Bank of Ireland on the graduate program. I hadn't meant to leave. It was the beginning of the Celtic Tiger, and there wasn't a necessity to migrate the shores at that time, like maybe earlier generations, but I got put on a graduate program that sent me to Jersey in the Channel Islands, which I thought was the most exciting thing that could ever happen to anybody. Offshore banking, okay, maybe not banking, but offshore, you know, I thought I was going to the Cayman Islands or something.
Exactly, sun and sea, even if it is only offshore Ireland in the UK.
Exactly, anyway, it wasn't really like that. Jersey was, I wasn't ready for a lifestyle in Jersey. I suppose the lifestyle in Jersey was kind of like the lifestyle here that I have today in West Cork, but I was in my early 20s. I was ready for big city lights at that point. So I spent a few years in Jersey before, because I'd already made the transition overseas, it was very easy for me to move to London at that point, you know, and then I got just sucked into the whole global mobility, work hard, play hard lifestyle. So I was in Tokyo for the turning of the new millennium. I moved to New York just, you know, a few months prior to September 11. I was in New York for the financial crash in 2008. So I've kind of lived that life. I've had that life and loved that life. And then fortunate enough to have 3 lovely children, and then that life comes to a grinding halt to some degree, and the lifestyle you have as a parent and a worker, I could have been in West Cork or downtown Brooklyn, you're still dealing with the same thing. You need to get to the park with the children, you need to get them to school, you need childcare, then you need to get to work, and it just wasn't really working for us. And then it was like, okay, it's time to move home. And I think that had always been at the back of my mind, that I would move home. I'm a very proud West Cork girl. You know, I was up there flying the Skibbereen flag when we won the All-Ireland Football Club way back when, and I knew the time would come at some point in time, and the time particularly point came when the 3 children were needed to have that outdoor space, and the Brooklyn apartment wasn't really giving us that anymore. So we left New York in 2012 and did 1 year in London, and then thinking we'd be in London for longer. You know, it was still in the midst of the crisis, and we thought it was a bit high risk coming back to West Cork. But you know, after a year in London and both of us working 14-hour days and 100% childcare, we just thought, something's got to give. So we moved back, and I became a stay-at-home mum for a few years until such time as the eldest started national school, and my husband commuted over and back to London for a few years. Now this is pre-Ludgate, so the Gigabyte wasn't here at that point, and had it been here, I suspect the remote working would have been an easier concept for us, but that wasn't facilitated at the time. So for us, you know, the offering of what Ludgate can give people means that those jobs that are in London, Tokyo, New York can be done from Skibbereen right now. But as I say, that wasn't there when we first moved back. So I was stay-at-home single parent for a period of time while he went over and back to London on that Monday morning flight from Cork Airport, like so many others, you know, those frequent flyers. And then, you know, that has a certain lifespan attached to it too. So he bowed out of that probably after around 18 months. And then we both became gainfully employed within West Cork. So that we've made the dream happen, you know. And yeah, we've never looked back. We have, I know you're going to ask me about what is the draw here. The draw is Inchdowney, the Beacon, the Warren, Ballyrizzard. You know, we're outdoorsy people. We're interested in having a local community available to us, not just having strangers as our neighbours. And that's what we get here, as well as having really interesting roles. And I think the role in Ludgate, you know, Ludgate is a social enterprise. It's a not-for-profit. And I think it has quite altruistic mission statement of job creation. So it's just ticking a lot of boxes for me in my personal life. So yeah, very, very, very happy to be here.
Well, can I just bring you back there to something that you just glossed over kind of quickly? Were you in New York for 9/11 then? And if you were working in the financial area, so you must have known a lot of people caught up on it that day.
Yeah, so I had just moved there that June, so I didn't know that many people yet. So that was a fortunate thing for me. But I was working with people who knew people. And I was downtown Manhattan. I was a few blocks away from it. So I was held in the building. We weren't allowed to leave the building. And so when the Twin Towers came down, we would have seen the debris and the dust and that cloud. And then you realized how ominous it was. And I had gone to work early that morning because we were talking to London about some project, and so I had been in before the first plane hit, and so the team in London had heard the news before we did, because they had the BBC News up on a big screen, and they thought it was just a small plane, a small twin aircraft or whatever, so we didn't realise the magnitude and significance of it till a couple of hours later. So that was obviously very traumatic. And a friend of mine from West Cork, Grainne McCarthy, she was there as well at the time. And so my initial reaction was she lived very close to Twin Towers, so, and I knew she was commuting to work. And so I immediately tried to contact her to make sure she was safe. But then our phone lines went down, so we actually couldn't contact anybody anymore. And I do remember phoning home to let them know that I was safe, but I normally only phoned on weekends. And my dad, who was still alive at the time, he was home from lunch. He was the local GP here in Skibbereen, Dr. Jeff O'Keeffe, and he was, "God, Grainne, it's great to hear from you. What are you calling on a Tuesday for?" And he hadn't heard the news, So I said, "Dad, I'm safe, I'm fine." And so that was a very peculiar experience, I suppose. It certainly bonded me to New York, the people of New York, the citizens of New York, and it was obviously something nobody ever wants to experience. And walking home over the Brooklyn Bridge actually wasn't the Brooklyn Bridge that was closed off, but Williamsburg Bridge. I felt like an evacuee. You know, I was wearing the face mask that we're all wearing at the moment, but back then you never saw people wearing face masks, right? So walking across Williamsburg Bridge with the fighter jets, you could hear them up in the air protecting New York, just because we didn't know if there were going to be any more attacks. Very, very bizarre experience that will stay with me, I suppose, all my life. Yeah.
And do you think maybe, Grainne, that somewhere in your psyche that kind of kicked off the seeds of an idea, you know, to come home and, you know, to get out of that kind of environment, and something not unlike what we're seeing now at the moment, with a huge interest again in property in West Cork from people who just want to get away from the madness of the world when it comes to big cities?
Yeah, it's a safe haven. West Cork is a safe haven, and I think we know, we're hearing it from the estate agents. Their phones are buzzing. People are buying that home, that second home, or maybe it's their first home. Maybe they're renting in the city, and instead of putting a deposit down and a very inflated price on a house in the city, they can get something down here. Well, I guess the prices might be spiking a little bit because of the demand, but there is no doubt that I certainly feel like the lockdown that we've been in since March, I feel the way we've had to adjust to it here has been far easier, if I may say that, than if I had been in the city, in that apartment in Brooklyn, where I wouldn't have been able to get out. Living in West Cork, you know, my 2-kilometer radius that I was allowed in, I was doing my walk there every day with the kids or on their bikes. And if I was in the city, that wouldn't have been as easy for me to do. You know, my pain was a very different pain to theirs. My pain was, I can't get to Inchydoney, or I can't get to Baltimore. Frankly, in the grand scheme of things, that didn't hurt that much. That was just a mild inconvenience, you know. So I think certainly city dwellers have had a tougher time, even if, you know, remote people here in West Cork might have felt more isolation as a result. So I think it's double-edged, you know. Certainly you get the loneliness of it, or if you have a group of people who aren't familiar with digital, you know, using laptops or iPads, and if they need to order from Fields or wherever for their online shopping, you know, I've heard of older people who might have been worried about where they were going to get their next shopping supplies from, and they lost weight as a result because they were being very careful with what they were eating, so they had enough to last them the week till, you know, somebody'd stop by. So I think certainly it was easier for us here, but I think the community watch that kicked in with the GAA teams and the Lions Club teams and all of those community groups who took care of a wider group of people who needed extra care, I think we're very fortunate, very fortunate.
So when you did come back to West Cork initially, you were working for Skibbereen, and I think Skibbereen has a bit of a history of kicking off in Ludgate itself. So tell me a little bit about some of the companies that have grown out of Ludgate and some of the ones that are working there at the minute. What types of industries are we talking, and what kind of size of companies are we talking about? Yeah,
so Skibbereen definitely is one of our flagship companies, and one of the success stories of Skibbereen. And you know, knowing Kevin and Matt after working with them for a few years, they're visionaries themselves, and the way they've adjusted their work model to cope with COVID has also been very agile and progressive, and it is a very progressive company as well. So I have a huge amount of respect for them and what they've achieved. You know, it's only in the last 5 years that they've managed to experience the growth, and that's as a result of the 1 gigabyte connectivity and the facilities that we have here in Ludgate that foster that networking and the talent base. And so now they've got that flagship building up at St. Focna's. So it's wonderful entering the town and seeing that building revitalized, and you know, Coleman did an amazing job getting that refurbed to accommodate the growth and the team there. So I feel very proud to have spent a few years with them, and I think they will be a case study that we will be trying to replicate for some other companies that are scaling. So what we have here right now within the building of Ludgate is we have a range of what we call companies that have second sites here. So maybe they have their headquarters in Cork or Dublin or London, and they might have their finance division here because they have skill sets here that are on a par with those urban locations. But obviously the operating costs are going to be significantly cheaper than trying to do it from a London or a Dublin. But the skill set is here, and the facilities, as I say, the connectivity is here. So Six West are here, their finance division is here, as well as some customer service. Excelco is another company that we have here. They have, I think, around 10 people here, and that's another company that has West Cork connections. Travel Master, which is kind of born and bred Skibbereen, you know, Damien Long's travel business. And so they have, I suppose, their headquarters here as opposed to a second site. And so we'd like to see them continue to grow and expand in the same way Spearline has expanded. Story Creative, Grainne O'Keeffe company, another success story. You know, Grainne is a very inspirational child of Skibbereen as well, and we're very proud of her here in Ludgate. She would have launched Ludgate, she was the CEO at the time, and I just take my hat off to her in terms of what she managed to achieve. And she has just an amazing skill set, particularly in the digital marketing space, and we continue to have a very close relationship with her. She would be, you know, certainly a strong brand ambassador for us. And yeah, we will be closely watching her success through the years, and I've no doubt she'll have continued success as she grows her business further. So yeah, a lot of inspirational people here in Skibbereen. It's very inspiring.
Do tell us a bit about how you've adjusted since the pandemic and how you're coping with social distancing and all that in the building.
So we had closed for 13 weeks in line with you know, the guidance from the government and the health professionals. And okay, first off, like every other business in Ireland, that impacted us. We're a social enterprise. We generate our income from desk rental and also from a bit of corporate sponsorship from AIB, so we're very thankful to them, as well as funding from Enterprise Ireland and philanthropy. So yeah, we're hurting financially, I suppose, in the same way as other people. But you know, we've come back, right? We've come back, and now we are adjusting to the new world like everybody else. So to accommodate social distancing, we've had to reduce the spaces that are available to us to ensure people aren't as close as they had been, and accommodate that social distancing. So our capacity for desk rental has reduced as a result. And we have also introduced Perspex screens. We have, you know, one of our key revenue streams was during peak holiday season in West Cork, like summertime, and where we could do hot desks. So hot desking, to anybody who's unfamiliar with that, is basically where you can rent a desk for a day, 2 days a week, or you can rent a meeting room. And yeah, it was, as I say, a key revenue stream for us. So we've had to curtail that somewhat to reduce turnover of people, to reduce the level of contact, to reduce the interactions. So now, instead of having a hot desk for a day, there's a minimum 1 week period, and that will just reduce that movement of people and make sure that the people you're interacting with on a weekly basis are the same group of people, so that if we ever had to do contact tracing, it would facilitate that. We recommend everybody downloads that app, the HSC app, the COVID app, and registers, you know, their symptoms on a daily basis. We obviously have a policy that we expect everybody to sign. We previously would have had a lot of visitors coming in, viewing the building to see, was it a location that they could see themselves working in. So that's not something we can accommodate too easily. So we're just very conscious of protecting the people that we have inside. So yeah, our health and safety is obviously of paramount importance.
Can I just, because I think the hot desk thing was very important because it did give people a little taste of what it might be like if they did move to West Cork. But your rates are actually very competitive, if I remember rightly. You might, because people don't realise, I think, how accessible it is. So what typically could you expect to pay for a week's desk rental?
Yeah, so the 1 week desk rental, which is Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. But if you need out of hours, we can accommodate that. But that's the standard, and that is €100 plus VAT. So that works out at €20 per day. If we look at our pricing strategy, we obviously know that number wouldn't hurt a group of people, but it is a number that would be expensive for other people. So we need to come up with a number that doesn't push people out of the market. So we do want to be accessible to the local market. We do want to be accessible to the person who's starting up and starting off. And we don't want to be exclusive for only the holiday makers that are only here during summer. We want to be available to the local community. That is our primary target audience.
And you get more than a desk though, Grainne, don't you? You get access to really top quality facilities in there.
Exactly. So we have meeting rooms, we have printing facilities, we obviously have the 1 gigabyte, there's the networking opportunities. So what we're hearing, the testimonials that we're hearing for the people who are repeat visitors, they're very reassuring and heartwarming that the mix that we have here, the service offering that we have is better than anywhere else. If we're benchmarking ourselves against our competitors, and we know there's a range of different types of pubs out there, whether it's private sector, public sector, or social enterprise, it's very important for us that the environment here is a conducive environment to productivity, to ideation. Ideation is the new buzzword for ideas.
Exactly.
Brainstorming, networking, and we certainly have that. So we have a lot of repeat visitors through the years, which is fantastic, and they are also our brand ambassadors. They are an extension of our sales and marketing team, because I mentioned before, we're a social enterprise. We're a very small team, so we need everybody to do their part to bring business to West Cork, and we want everybody to feel they are part and parcel of that sales and marketing team. So I would say to the Southern Star audience, you guys are our brand ambassadors. Go out there and pitch West Cork for us to, overseas people who want, it was me 10 years ago. Bring Grainne O'Keeffe back, bring your grandchild back, bring your daughter back or your son, and set up shop here, set up home, and we can certainly, we want to talk to you, we want to hear your ideas, but we also want to know what you need so that we can accommodate that.
And it's not just overseas, because I'm one of those blow-ins from Cork via Dublin, so you mightn't be that far away and you might still find it's a great lifestyle improvement.
Definitely.
And
Definitely.
just when you're talking about there, I mean, just to show the success of Ludgate, you are on a bit of an expansion trail at the moment, and you do have plans to get bigger, better, brighter, as they say. So tell us a bit about those plans.
Yeah. So Adrienne Harrington, who was my predecessor, she was very successful in securing funding from Enterprise Ireland, and that would have been in the news there probably a year or so ago. And with that money, we are now in a position where we can refurb the old Mercy Heights. So if anybody's unfamiliar with Mercy Heights, it's the old girls' secondary school. Now, it's not the old national school or the convent where the nuns live. It's the Mercy Heights, where many of us would have gone to school. And so we're going to use that money to refurbish it. At this moment in time, we're going through the planning process. And assuming that is successful, we hope to commence that refurbishment early November, such that that refit is completed by April next year, assuming no delays. And then we'll get furniture and fittings in. So hopefully by April, May time next year, we are available to be moving, hopefully either second sites or companies that are scaling, that they want to have their headquarters there, or startups. We would anticipate that they would be in that building. What's also very exciting is we are going to be having a STEM and innovation centre. So that's kind of under the remit of Kieran Collins, who is partnering with the likes of Google and the Department of Education and UCC and CIT, whereby we can, the ultimate goal there is augmenting the digital literacy of our school children from X% to Y%. And we know that the schools have been very challenged with since COVID with the home learning, and whether it's the connectivity in the home, or whether it's the skills of the children and the parents, or whether it's availability of the hardware. So Kieran's remit has never been more important, and we feel this STEM facility that we'll have available to us will be an extension of that. So I suppose we now will start planning it, but then we'll have that facility in 12 months' time to welcome students in, to welcome whether it's primary, secondary, or third level students in, and to help them, foster them with their digital transformation journey, I suppose. Yeah, so it's very, very exciting.
You'll have two bases in the town, really. At either end of the town nearly, we'll
actually have a third base. No, we're actually going to have a couple of a third base now. We feel, as I mentioned earlier on, we feel Ludgate is a movement. It's a concept. It's not confined to the building, the old bakery. It's not going to be confined to Mercy Heights. So we, as we get demand for expansion, we want to tap into buildings that exist here already that can, they may need a lick of paint, they may need an overhaul, they may need some refurbishment. So the old Roycroft building in Fields Car Park, we are now, hopefully in 2 weeks' time, we'll have that available. We'll have 7 office spaces available there for rent. So they are private. So on the back of interest that we were seeing for private space, as opposed to open plan, and some sectors, whether it's legal or health or financial services, we're finding that there's a demand for private space. And while we have some available here in Ludgate, they're more meeting rooms, and we want to make sure that those meeting rooms are still available as meeting rooms and not dedicated private space. So yeah, Adam Walsh has been playing a blinder there, refurbing and getting, accommodating, the health and safety side of things. So that should be available in 2 weeks. So that's our third, I suppose, Ludgate Old Bakery, number 1, that's live. Roycroft's available in 2 weeks. Ludgate 2, we might have a new name, but Ludgate 2 for the moment, Mercy Heights, available next year. And as demand comes, and as there are those buildings out there, we saw Matt and Kevin in Spearline refurbing the boys' secondary school. We think the world is our oyster here. We would love to see any old building refurbed as and when the demand comes our way. So yeah, we're open to hearing about those buildings.
That's great. And I think a little exclusive there for the Southern Star. We hadn't heard about Ludgate 2.5 or 3 or whatever.
There you go.
So Grainne, I don't know if you get much downtime. It sounds like you're very busy between family and work, but tell me one thing you're watching, one thing you're reading, and one thing you're listening to, be it podcast or audiobook or whatever.
Well, I mightn't be able to tick all of them off because, as you say, with the children and the work, there isn't a huge amount of free time. Watching, it mightn't necessarily be TV. It might be watching my children play GAA at Nahamilla. Sorry, I'm in Clongilty. Or we were playing against O'Donovan Rossa here a few weeks ago, so that was really lovely coming back to watch the under-12s play, and it was very weird shouting for Clon and not saying up Skib when I saw the red and white. So watching that. I also saw Skull Namara. I'm going to give that a shout out. It was actually our homework, our Obawalia during the lockdown from the Grail Skull in Clongilty, which was a beautiful YouTube 3-series clip of our sea life, and it was done locally here in West Cork, and then I saw it, RT2 picked it up for their homeschooling, so I thought that was fantastic for our kids to learn and see what's all around them. And I just want to say also the John Hume piece that we saw the other night, I thought was a very moving piece from RTE, and I just think he just played such a pivotal role in modern Irish history. I think we need to continue to recognise what he has given to Ireland. So they're the things that I've been watching, and when I leave my escapism, it's the Nordic detective dark stuff, So what else? What am I reading? Oh, I'll be honest, I used to love being a reader, but I don't get too much time for reading anymore. So I'm reading a lot about remote work and smart work and the new hybrid model at the moment. So that's my reading material. Sorry for being a bit dry. Yeah.
A combination of work and hobby tied in together there.
Yeah.
And are you a podcast fan, or do you listen to audiobooks, or what would you do maybe when you're driving? What would you tune into?
Yeah, I'm good with the podcasts and radio, and I'm a big fan of the Southern Star podcast. So well done on that. That's fantastic to see you guys move. You've been there from the very start on your own digital journey. So I think yeah, you're certainly bringing West Cork into that new digital world. So I think we saw Nadine O'Regan narrate a story on, I can't remember the specific name now, but it was good to have. That was a very interesting piece to listen to as well, and a bit of West Cork crime and drama, and so very interesting to hear that through podcast. And of course Red FM, who are also partners with the SIRO Ludgate as well, so I enjoy listening. On a Friday night driving home, I'll be listening to Red FM for a little bit of music, so
real switch off stuff then, so
yeah,
after the madness of the week. So listen, Grainne, thank you so much for joining us, and
sure.
We will be.
Can I just give one last shout out before I leave? So there's a Galley Head swim happening this Saturday. I'm not sure when this is being broadcast, so it might be after the fact, but the swim is in aid of the West Cork Underwater Search and Rescue team, as well as Marymount. So it's a swim from Red Strand to the Warren, 10-kilometer swim. I'm participating in it for one leg with the relay team. So people might see that and support that through the GoFundMe pages that they're seeing around there. So that they're obviously very, very worthy causes.
The RNLI.
It's the West Cork Underwater Search and Rescue.
Okay.
So they would obviously partner with RNLI, but
yeah.
it's not specific to RNLI.
So if people want to donate, they can search for the West Cork Underwater Search and Rescue.
Search and Rescue, exactly.
Okay, that's excellent. So obviously swimming is another one of your hobbies if you're heading off.
Well, when I do free time, I do like to do triathlons. So I'm part of the West Cork Triathlon Club, and swimming and cycling and a little bit of running. Running hurts my body now, but certainly swimming and cycling.
Well done, Grainne. I don't know how you fit it all in, but fair play to you. You're a great ambassador for moving back to West Cork anyway, that's for sure. So thanks for joining
everything. Thanks, really, Siobhan.
And now for a musical slot. We all love a bit of nostalgia these days, and so we have decided to take a look back at our very popular Southern Star sessions, which were all recorded in our Southern Star offices in Skibbereen in recent years. Each week we will ask one of our regular podcast presenters to choose their personal favourite, and this week it's the turn of Niall O'Driscoll. So Niall, tell us about your choice this week.
Yeah, this was a good one. And it was one of the very early ones that we did, Siobhan. The artist or the band are Jeff Scroggins Colorado. The name probably gives it away. They don't actually come from Colorado, but they are from the States, and they were a bluegrass band that were in the area. They were playing some gigs locally, and they had just come from Levis's in Ballyhob the night before. And they came in, and I was blown away by them because they came in. We set up the microphone in front of them, and they just started playing, and it was like there was a train had gone through the room. The sound was incredible. It was really, really impressive. So I hope some people will have seen it before. Anyone that hasn't, I hope you really enjoy it. This is Jeff Scroggins Colorado singing Rambling Feels Good.
Brown scorched mountains worn down all the time and wind. I'm a stranger to this place. I proud line these hills, going where I've already been. Salt crusted land leaving Reno looks a bit like stone. But the way I feel tonight, everything is alright. I'm burning up love in my soul. And it feels good, and I carry your love like an old coat that keeps me from the cold. Unconscious masses of all my bad habits and a growing sense of getting old. Well, California's effort keeps rolling and rattling down the line. Tonight I'll be in Utah, tomorrow Colorado. As long as I keep moving, I'll be fine. Well, I thumbed down from Alaska and searched this whole country wide. From sea to shining sea, it's the way it used to be. Just looking for somewhere to spend my time. And it feels good, and I carry your love like an old coat that keeps me from the cold. Unconscious masses
you for listening to the Southern Star Coronavirus Podcast. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to our podcast, which is available now on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Acast, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Keeps me from the cold.